Hi, this is Larry Hatch, and I am the Horticultural Taxonomist with cultivarorg. And this episode is varieties of the bird's nest fern, generally known as Asplenium nidus. Some people say nidus, but nidus would be more in line with classic Latin. And before I get too far, we should say some people believe these cultivars belong to more than one species, and that's very possible. But without spores and other details, um, the determination is very difficult to make. The other species involved would be Asplenium australasiacum, and that is spelled Austral, and then there's also one called Asplenium antiquum. So they probably belong to any of these three species, but mostly the nidus group. So here's a picture to start off with of the basic nidus itself, sort of species typical, the old world thing. And in large old greenhouses and conservatories, you often see them producing spores, and some of these things get huge. Some of them they can get 3 to 4 feet across. Plants to 5 feet wide have been known where they're super happy. But generally in the home environment, they're not as long lived because of the humidity. And they, if you got one 2 feet across, you're doing pretty darn well. Now, I've had some plant people tell me, why don't you just increase the humidity? Put a humidifier in your plant room or something. Well, I live in the South. You increase the humidity beyond what's normally soaking in your house from outdoors, you're going to get black mold all over your house, in your walls. It'll be toxic and unlivable. So I'm not ramping up my humidity to 85% for some plants. If I want to do that, I'll have a proper greenhouse environment. So just leave it at that. This is brought to you by cultivarorg. We're an organization who documents and standardizes. We actually register cultivars in groups that aren't registered otherwise, of houseplants, woody plants, as well as herbaceous, hardy herbaceous perennials. And we have a number of websites. Some are paid, some are free. But the good news is our houseplant one is entirely free. And it is, I venture to say, the largest houseplant encyclopedia on the internet, if not anywhere else. For example, we have 1,600 different coleus described, hundreds of pictures. We have 142 varieties of ornamental fig. We just have hundreds and hundreds of philodendrons and monstera and syngoniums. Our syngonium list is 272, and nearly all of them are described. Again, it's all free. Just go to cultivarorg and click on Hatch's Interior Plants. The first cultivar I want to bring up is one of the cutest. It's called Curly Wave, and it's a sort of a dwarf, so far, version of the other curly stuff, which we'll be talking about in a minute. A lot of these are very similar. If you grow them side by side and look at the pictures, maybe you might have to go back to this video a couple of times before you figure it out. But again, it's always best to buy plants that are named so you know what they are. Curly Wave is more compact and upright, kind of vase-shaped, as they say, than some of the others, which are more sprawling or arching. It stays fairly small. It was tissue cultured as a small pot plant, and I grabbed one of those suckers on an impulse. That's what it is. It's an impulse buy. Put it in my office. People walk by and they go, "Is that real?" And they go, "That's not real." I don't feel it. Oh, it is real. And I'm like, well, it's in real wet soil. I wouldn't go to that trouble if it wasn't real. And it's such a beautiful plant. It almost looks fake. It's one of those kind of things, but it doesn't look that fake. It looks pretty darn healthy to me, and it's got undulating leaflets. But like I say, it's more compact and less dimpled than some of the others we'll get to a little bit later. The first cultivar that had any real degree of fame in terms of the mass market was called Victoria, and it's just an elegant plant with long, narrow fronds, and these are fronds, not leaves, and they arch over, and they're just classic arching ferns, and the fronds are a lighter green than the species generally, and they have a slight, very fine undulation to the margins. The undulation and texture does not generally occur in the middle of the blade. It's only very subtle there. But the thing about this thing is it's not one of those stiff, ungainly, crispy things. It's a very elegant form and very sophisticated. The next one is fairly new, and I've actually not seen it. I got this from a collector. It's called Hurricane. It's one with some texture, not a lot, and all the fronds are kind of sickle-shaped or falcate, and they sort of spin around in a spiral like a green hurricane. That's one we'll probably see more of. I know when you can get them in the U.S., they're fairly expensive. One of those $40 to $60 deals. Not that $40 is a lot, but you get something so miniature at that price. The next one I've not seen in person either or grown. It's called Cobra. It's another one, but it's got much more irregular dimpling and rugosity, kind of rough texturing and depressions between the veins in the frond. And those are irregular in size. So some are small, some are large troughs. And generally the thing about this one is that the apex kind of hooks over like a cobra head. Maybe this photo doesn't do it justice, but you can see sort of where it's going. And unlike Victoria, which is elegant arching, this thing is rigid, and it's got that kind of that cobra head to it. So these things differ not only in the stiffness and positioning of the fronds, but their texture. The next one is a white variegated form, and you see that on websites generally outside the United States, and I don't believe it has a name, but it has white to cream bands between the green veins on the frond. There is some suggestion I've read that this is a Asplenium nidus, because that species does sometimes do this sort of slate white banding, but I don't know that for a fact, and again, taxonomically we haven't really verified that. Maybe you have, and you can comment on that. But it's an interesting plant, very expensive, probably $150 on up if you can even find it. The next one is a very rare one. It's called Silverwing. It's not as distinctly banded as this white variegated one we just looked at. It's more of a frosty, delicate banding, and it does have quite a bit of rippling or lasagna texture, but it's not lasagna. The next one is a plant I grew for many years. In fact, this is on my former home carpet. It's a variety called Leslie, and it's a form of the old cristatus. And it's basically a more compact form. The cristate or forked or crested ends are more exaggerated and longer, or bigger I should say. They're a larger proportion of the frond in Leslie, and it's a very compact, almost globose plant. It's nothing really terribly elegant about it. It's just kind of a ball of beautiful olive green, shiny crests, and these crests are a third to half the length of the blade. And so I'll quickly get to the next one, which is the old original cristatus, and that just has cresting or forking on the tips, leaving a very narrow I said it again, another frond base. So because the cresting's only on the end, the fronds are very long and flexible, it does have a nice arching look. Again, not as elegant as Victoria, but among the crested, it's a really beautiful plant. But if you want something denser and compact, smaller, Leslie is a good one to get. This next one is called Fimbriatus, and it's a weirder one. It's not so much undulate and rippled or rugose as it is a cut leaf. It's a cut. Here we go again. Cut frond. The fronds are irregularly incised. Now it does have a lot of texture to it. Fronds are fairly stiff and not arching as much, but it's a very fimbriate. Fimbriate basically means cut or incised, and it's a very rare form. I think you'd be hard pressed to find one in commerce generally today, and it's a beautiful plant, but it's more of a collector's thing. The next one, by the way, this was taken at the Renolda greenhouses in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where it is on display. The next plant I took at Longwood Gardens. It's the true plicatum, and you can see how super rippled and rough these fronds are. This is the true plicatum, and I'll quickly get into the next one, which is our last one. That is the true lasagna. So maybe if you want to go back and forth, the plicatum has very, very deep troughs and undulations between the secondary veins of the frond. It's a very deep. Plicatum means folded, so it's got deep, deep, deep folds, and it's a very thick frond, not terribly elegant. You normally don't see it with a lot of fronds, so this longwood plant was the best one I think I'd ever seen. And the lasagna is more subtle than that. The troughs and the folds are not as deep, and it does have some marginal undulations, like a cooked lasagna noodle does. So anyway, if you look, the plicatum has been called lasagna, and lasagna has been called I don't know what. And the two have been merged together as one thing, but they are not. So if you look at these two, I think you can tell the difference between the two of them. And once again, please visit cultivar.org and click on Hatch's interior plants. I know you'll love it. If you like plants, rare varieties of plants, you'll find it exciting. And yes, we do have more varieties of bird's nest fern on there. Some that I don't have pictures of, so they're only described and documented in as much detail as I have, and so there's that. And we have other fern groups, like if you like adiantums, well over 100 cultivars on there documented. Over 150 cultivars of Boston fern and Ephemerlepis are documented. I went back to old nursery catalogs, old books, scanned those pictures. We have huge amounts of documentation on those cultivars of other plants, of other ferns. You'll just find some really great stuff there. And I also have to put in a plug. There is another species of Asplenium, and that would be I'm not going to try to spell this because I never get it right. It's Asplenium scolopendrium, Scolopendrium, and it's a plant native to Japan and also the eastern United States. In fact, I've seen it in the wild in New York State. And it's over mostly in Europe, sported well over 200, they say, different cultivars, and the British kind of fern craze they had in the Victoria era kind of multiplied that. So some of those do look a little bit like some of the bird's nest ferns, but it is actually a cold hardy species. In fact, it grows in Syracuse, New York in zone 4, where it can get down to 20 or 30 below. So it's a tough fern. Nothing like these bird's nest ferns, which don't take any frost. But if you can dry some of the scolopendriums, there's variegated ones, there's cristated ones, there's cut ones, following the same pattern really as the bird's nest ferns. So I want to put a plug in for that species as well. And we do have a lot of documentation on those. Those are in Hatch's Perennials, which is on the pay side of our website. But you'll But if you study Asplenium scolopendrium, you'll find some very interesting variations there too. And once you get into these weird ferns, it's sort of hard not to want to buy a lot of them and to grow them and see them. So anyway, thanks for everything, your time. Please subscribe. That gives us some favorable Google algorithms, search engine positions. And by the way, the only reason we can make Hatch's Interior Plants, this huge encyclopedia, free is if we get sponsors for advertisements and pages and other things that fund that. So please help us out with that, and we'll do more videos. We're going to do more videos on new houseplant varieties that are discovered and named and documented. I've already got one in that series, which I'll link to. So please let us know. Give us your feedback, corrections, comments, your experiences. Again, if you differ with me on the names of these plants or the descriptions, please let me know. I'm a taxonomist, but we all are not perfect. And so we've got some fern experts out there. Tell us your experiences and help everybody out. Thank you.